Mark Miller.
There we go.
As you just heard, this meeting will be recorded, and we will have this available, this presentation available on our live binders. So Christine would be able to, I think, forward that to you if you would like to go in and take a look at the different types of trainings we have. Again, my name is Mark Miller. I'm the provider liaison for Works for Me, and Patty Schramm is with us today. Patty, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Patty Schramm, the parent resource or parent mentor for the for Mark and this program. So yeah, I also run the SALT series. So
yeah, so Patty is our family engagement extraordinaire, and she also kind of keeps us on track with all of our things with live binders and for our presentations. So we really appreciate having Patty with us today. So again, good morning. We are going to be doing a job coach training, and this is going to be a basic overview of job coaching. And I think since we just have, we have about, it looks like 10 people on with us in addition to ourselves. If we could go around just really quickly, if people could unmute just for a second, introduce yourself, and let us know what your role is with Easterseals, and then we'll kind of move into the presentation. So we can start with Christine, if you want to kick us off, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Christine Mason. I'm the director of our transition and community employment program, and I'm kind of leading the Works for Me here at Easterseals Redwood.
Thank you.
Along with Erica and Bree's help, because this is mostly Erica and Bree's team, although I've got one staff on here, I believe.
Okay. So. All right. Sean, you want
to? Yeah, I am Sean Morey, and I am the team lead here at the Hamilton Hub, Butler County Working Pro.
Whoever wants to go next.
I'm Jeanette Atkins. I work at the Gilbert location in production.
Hi, I'm Ashley Johnson. I am the team lead at the Cincinnati Museum Center.
Hi.
Hello, my name is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Anasia.
Oh, my name is Anasia, and I'm the lead for the Work and Grow program at the zoo.
Hi, I'm Jackie Walker, and I am the team lead for the Clover Nook Club site.
I'm Antoine, and I am the lead at the College Hill Hub.
And I'm Sarah Regal, and I am the lead staff of production in Butler County.
Great. Did we get everybody?
I am Sherry Wells, and I am the DS Kayak Enclave location.
Hello, I'm Denise Smith. I am a DS at Kayak location.
And I'm Bree Gent. I'm the manager over the programs that all of these great, wonderful people are here for.
Woohoo! Awesome. Did that catch us? Did we catch up on everybody?
Hi, I'm Christy Schultz, and I'm a job coach with Project Search at the Atrium in Middletown.
Troy Woolen, I'm from Butler County.
Did we get everybody? All right. Well, welcome everybody. I keep hearing the Butler County, the people there, and I recognize some of the programs there, especially Kayak and the center that you have there off of Fairgrove. I originally worked in Butler County. I actually started off as a job coach for Butler County, the Butler County Board, back in a long time ago. I won't say what year it was, but it was a long time ago. So job coaching is very near and dear to my heart, and it's probably, of all the services that we have, job coaching has always been one of my favorites. So my two very favorites, job coaching, and I love them equally, job coaching and discovery. Those are my two faves. And so I'm real happy to be able to kind of share some information. Again, this is going to be a basic overview, going to pack a lot of information into a short amount of time. But some of the questions that you may have is, well, why are we doing a job coach training for people that may not be necessarily doing job coaching right now? And the reason is that just basically learning how to do training in general with people is always a good thing. And we're always looking, and works for me, how we can bridge any gaps between people who might be working in vocational habilitation. So there might be a DSP working in vocational habilitation or group employment or community integration, ADS. So bridging those gaps and doing some cross-functional training for people to be able to have at least some exposure to some of the different training, even though it may not be necessarily what their job title is. And so that's why we're kind of rolling this out with Works for Me. And so we're going to go ahead and dive into it. As I said, this is probably my favorite service that we do. And so I'm going to give you some of the reasons why. And we can go to the next slide, Patty. So 7 reasons why job coaching is the coolest job in the world. And I really do believe this. Job coaches get to see firsthand how people with disabilities can be accepted and valued for their talents and efforts. So we are right there in the front lines when you're job coaching and you're on the job site with a person, and you get to see how people react. And these are people who are their coworkers or their supervisors. And so you get that firsthand visual of how a person can really be part of a team and working as part of the team. And it's just very gratifying to see that. And seeing how they are valued for their talents and efforts. And job coaches are exposed to a multitude of businesses, jobs, and people in the community. So if you job coach long enough, you'll probably find yourself working in about every kind of business imaginable, anywhere from the service industry to manufacturing to office environments. So you get to work around a whole lot of different businesses and jobs, and you get to meet a lot of people in the community, a lot of good people in the community. Job coaches' jobs are usually not boring or routine. And I think if any of the job coaches on here can attest to that, that's the one thing that is a pretty common denominator, is that it is not a boring job or routine. You're always you're kind of always on the alert for things that are going on with the person that you're training. And so it kind of keeps you mentally aware and on the move most of the time. Job coaches get to work with a great deal of independence and self-direction. So job coaches are out there on their own most of the time. You don't have a supervisor usually who is there looking over your shoulder. Some job coaches think that's a good thing. Some job coaches would like to have more supervision. And so sometimes it's kind of it's a fine line or a slippery slope to be able to make sure that you get just the right amount of supervision, because you're out there at different times of the day, different days of the week. So job coaches do have a lot of independence. And as I said, a lot of job coaches really like that. They like being able to work independently and using their own self-direction. Job coaches are encouraged to think outside of the box, and they're valued for their ability to be creative and resourceful. When you're working, when you're job coaching, you may go into the training situation with one plan, but you really sometimes have to be thinking about what are other things that you can do that might help this job work out better for the person. And so thinking outside of the box and being creative and resourceful is really something that job coaches really have to do. They have to be able to think outside of the box. So job coaches are in a unique position to impact the way people with disabilities are perceived as contributing members of the community. And so what I mean by that is, why I think this is just a really cool thing. I remember working with a young man in Butler County in Fairfield that was working in a La Rosa's. And this young man had a job where he would go around and he would be filling up the salt and pepper shakers, the Parmesan cheese, the peppers, all of the condiments, all the things. And so he did this from his power chair, and he had a lap tray, and he would go around. And one of the things I got to see was just how much he would be doing this, and the customers would be there dining, and they would see him working, and you could tell that they were really kind of thinking this was pretty cool. This was a pretty cool thing. And so you get to see how people, just general community members, are responding to and appreciate the efforts of the people that we're working with out in the community. And so I always thought that that was a really cool thing to see, how they can change maybe some preconceived notions that they have of people with disabilities working in the community. And so job coaches really are there on the front line and helping to make that impact. And then the final thing, number 7, good job coaches are in very high demand. I know when I was supervising job coaches and job developers and workforce development teams in general, job coaches, a good job coach is just something that is really you want to hold on to. You want to make sure that you're providing them with what they need, and that they're very well respected and in very high demand. So good job coaches are definitely something that me as a manager is on the hunt for at all times, because they just really are there to make it happen for that person. And so you want them to be on your team. Okay, we'll go to the next. We're going to go to the next slide. Just a little bit of history. This really goes back a long time. Mark Gold. I'm not sure if anybody's really heard of Mark Gold before. This goes back into the 70s, but kind of where all this stuff come about from job coaching is from Mark Gold and Try Another Way. Basically, Mark Gold was a PhD, I believe, and he kind of coined the term Try Another Way. He was working with people with very, very high impact of disability, and he came up with this systematic training of being able to help people learn breaking down tasks and showing that people with very, very high impact of disability are able to do tasks that are transferable to the business community. And so he was really kind of the godfather of all of the things, task analysis, when it comes to working with the job, people trying to work into the community. So I'm not suggesting we go out and do a lot of training on Mark Gold, but he definitely was one of my one of my go-tos back in the day, whenever we were learning about how to do job coaching, how to do systematic training. So Mark Gold and Associates, training for jobs then and now. So the way we look at training for job coaches right now is, we do these types of trainings. We'll do online trainings. Well, back when I started, we didn't have that. Unfortunately, we had to go to different places for that training. So fortunately, we're now able to have online training, and we're able to have different things that we can go and look at, like these virtual types of Zoom meetings and things like that. So that is a good thing for job coaches to be able to learn some of the techniques and strategies. Some other things that we've learned over the years is that we have sometimes underestimated society. And things that we've learned over the years is that people, both people in the community, employers, coworkers, really are much more accepting than we've ever really given them credit for. And so I think that that's something that we've learned over the years. I think something that we could do a little better under that category is to share some of those things that we've learned, so that we may have family members who are afraid that their sons or daughters, if they get a job in the community, are going to be in danger, or they're going to be made fun of, or they're not going to be respected. And I don't think that that's what we've seen. I'm sure that it has happened and does happen, but to the extent that people fear that, I think that we really have underestimated the people out on the jobs and just in the general community at large. Another thing is a little bit of history is people with developmental disabilities can learn, work, and thrive in competitive community jobs. I know that sounds like a pretty crazy statement, because, yeah, we do know that, but there are still a lot of people who are still trying to understand that that is something that their son or daughter can do, is actually thrive in a competitive community job. And then the difference of training in a facility versus community jobs. So one of the things I think that we've learned over the years is, we do a lot of training in facilities, and the training is good and it's valuable. But a lot of times, some of the things that we've learned over the years is that not all the training that we do in facilities is transferable or even translatable. And so when we think about doing job coach training or doing just training in general, we really want to be aware that, trying to do that or doing that in the community might yield some better results, because those are you learn in the environment where the things are going to actually occur. Okay, that's a little bit of history, some of the things we've learned over the years. We'll go to the next slide. And here are some very basics. This is our agenda today that we're going to kind of get through. Hold on one second here. I need to run around and get the lights to turn back on. 1 second. Here we go. I'm actually in a library that the lights go out every 30 minutes is what I've learned. So that's unfortunate, but just bear with me. So on the agenda today, vocational profile, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about job analysis, task analysis, job coach, some job training techniques. We're going to learn a little bit of job coach tools of the trade. We're going to learn a little on natural supports, some job site etiquette, fading. We're going to talk about basic documentation, and we're going to touch a little on some assistive technology that job coaches might use. So we'll go to the next slide. So the role of a job coach, and this is just the basic out the door functions of a job coach: to assist the employee with a disability to learn their new jobs and facilitate their inclusion. Sometimes a job coach will act as an employment consultant with more emphasis to help of the employers so they can provide necessary training. So not all times do we have to go in and from start to finish be there to train every aspect of the job. Sometimes the person's able to get their training with the person who would do the training for the store. It could be a coworker, it could be a manager. And so sometimes that job coach would just come in as a consultant to help out and tweak anything where there might be some needs. And then support coworkers and supervisors to feel confident. And I think this is a really important one when we talk about the role of the job coach, is that, we want to support the coworkers and supervisors. We want to be there when they need support. And when you think about it, these are the champions who are going to make it work for this person. And so they knowing that you have their back, and that if something comes up, if there's a new job duty or some new tasks that they would like the person to learn, that you're going to be there to help out if needed. And so just giving them that level of support and knowing that they give me a call, I'll be there, is, I think, really does help with the coworkers and supervisors, so that they know that they have your support. Okay, next slide, please. And this is not the role of a job coach. This is going to sound really crazy, but back in years ago, we used to do this kind of stuff. So that not the role of the job coach is to fill in on the job if the employee can't make it to work. Not the role of the job coach is to act as a coworker alongside the new employee. So, and I'm going to tell you just a couple little stories about that. And then not the role is to ensure that production quota is met for the employee. So on the first bullet point, to fill in on the job if the employee can't make it to work. There was a point in time when job coaches would actually go in, and we wanted it to work out so bad for that person. And we still do, but we would do anything to make sure that it worked out. And so if that meant that the person couldn't be there, but the employer still needed to get it done, we would actually fill in. I can tell you, one of the craziest times is I was doing overnight maintenance job coaching at McDonald's in Fairfield, and the person called in sick, and the manager says, "But hey, we still need to get this store clean." And lo and behold, there I was working overnight maintenance by myself. They kind of lock you in the store, and you can get out, but they lock the doors and you get the job done. That is not the role of the job coach, but we did used to do that type of thing back in the day. You're to act as a coworker alongside the new employee. And it's really important that you that you make your role understood. And the ways that you do that is by the way you model things. So if you go in and you just start doing all the work, they're going to really, they're going to be looking at you like, well, okay, so what is your role? They want to see, what it is that you're going to be doing. I remember one of my coworkers, my colleagues, who was a job coach, was at Bob Evans one time and found out that his name was actually on the schedule. And, yeah, so that was something that we had to kind of correct. I know these things sound crazy, but this is really true stuff. So that kind of stuff should not happen these days. To ensure that production quota is met. Now, sometimes there is some partial participation that can happen when you're working with somebody, just so that they're able to get up. You might do some parallel pacing, and so that would mean that you're doing some of the work with the person until they're able to get up and meet that quota. But it's not something that you just run in and do just to make sure that you're meeting that quota. So you always have to reflect back. Your role for being there is for that person to be independent. And so you're always looking from day one how to go in and then to be out of there. From day one, you want to work yourself out of a job there. And so those are ways of doing that, or to not do too much to overcompensate. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. So some common work-related issues we have, and these are things that job coaches deal with. I did highlight just a couple of them that I'll get to first. So transportation gaps. Those are things that you want to make sure that from day one that you have that nailed down. Inevitably, transportation can always be dicey, especially, if you're working with public transportation, or even if you're working with non-medical transportation for jobs. You still want to make sure that you nail down all of the transportation well in advance. General interpersonal issues. These are things that you want to make sure that you have a good bead on before you even go into the job. And so knowing the person that you're training, you want to make sure that you definitely have a good bead on some of the things that might come up. It could be interpersonal related issues. Other things that are just basic things: punctuality, attendance, grooming, distractibility, following things. So these are all of the things that you really want to try to have some idea about the person, the things that you may have to work with from day one, just some common work related issues. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. So vocational or a customer profile. So this is a tool that job coaches can use to learn more about the job trainee. So it's good to practice to review this profile before the first day of training. Some of the other things that you could use if you don't have a vocational profile that's done, or some background on the person, is you might even just look at the ISP. There's good information in there. But doing your homework in advance, if you have that opportunity, is really a good idea. Just that you have an idea. Meeting the person, I've not seen it go great for job coaches when they not even had a chance to meet the person that they're going to be training. So it's always really good to be able to have an idea of the person and their profile and the needs that they're going to have before the first day of training. And the vocational profile is a good tool that really kind of holds a lot of information that you can review at a glance, and to have an understanding about some of the things that you may be dealing with when you're job coaching. Okay, next slide, please. Job analysis. Now, a job analysis is typically a tool that job developers may do and probably should do. If you have people who are doing both job development or job coaches, then it would be the same person, obviously. But a job analysis is a process for identifying basically the task and everything that's going on that job: environmental conditions, physical demands. And so sometimes there may be some discrepancies or gaps between what the job analysis said and the person's profile. So for example, if the job analysis says that the environment is going to be very hot, it doesn't have climate control, and in the person's profile they say they do not want to work in that kind of environment, you can either try to develop some type of accommodations for that or adaptations. But these are where thinking outside of the box and thinking on the run really play into the talents of a job coach to be able to figure that out on the fly. But job analysis should have all the things about that job that the person is going to be encountering, what they're going to be expected to do prior to the actual job. So job analysis, very important tool for both job developers and job coaches. Okay, next slide, please. Task analysis. We could probably spend a couple of hours on task analysis. I'm obviously not going to be doing that, but I do want to spend a little bit of time on that today to talk about task analysis. I think that task analysis is something that doesn't always get done as a priority, unfortunately. I think that we do what we do in our paperwork when we're doing OOD. There's some task analysis, some steps that they would do, or some tasks that they're expected to do. But I think as we're starting to work more, and especially with Works for Me, for people who may not have had a lot of job experience or competitive or expectations of competitive level employment, the task analysis becomes more important because the skills that they have may not be as honed as well as they should be. So understanding, how to get a person to be able to complete a task successfully on the job, I think task analysis is really an important aspect of that. So task analysis is a process of breaking a skill down into smaller, more manageable components. Once it's complete, it can be used to teach learners a skill that might be too complex to teach all at once. And some other practices that we have out there, and this has been, I think, pretty successful for some people who really are more visual learners. Using a video modeling can be used to teach components building upon one another until the skill is complete. So we're going to talk a little bit more about task analysis in the next slide. So there's three major components of task analysis, and I don't want to get too teachy on this, but I mean, these I think are just the three things, if you can remember today. You have the method, and basically that's just, how do you do this job? So when you go in to learn the job yourself as a job coach, how do you do it? So you do this, you do this, you do this. That's the way a task is done. So you want to have the method. And then the content. Well, what is it? What is the things that you're breaking down into teachable steps? And then you want to have a process. How are you going to teach it? So some of the teaching methods that you might use, or some techniques, would be the format, which your format would be forward or backward chaining or total task. I'll talk a little about what those are. And then feedback, how you communicate your instruction. Are you going to be using gestural prompts, or are you going to be using verbal prompts or physical prompts? So that's basically in one slide, just the basic components of task analysis. So let's just talk about the method, the way the task is done. The way that I would and have done as a job coach is you want to ask the person who actually has done the job before, if at all possible, or the manager, tell me how you do this task. How do you want to get this done? That way, you, as close as you can get it done to the correct way the first time, that'll preclude you from having to go back and retrain if in fact you got it wrong, or you didn't get the way they really wanted to have the job done. And then when you're breaking it down, and you think about the person when you have in the content, when you're breaking down the content, you don't want to just break everything down. Knowing the person and knowing how to maybe group some of the tasks together make it much more teachable, and you don't have to spend as much time to tear it down into too many teachable steps. And then the process, you want to make sure that a person may not do as well if you're just telling them to do it. They would like you to show them how to do it first. So a lot of people are very visual in the way they learn things, and so you would show them how to do it. Now I want to add that, as when you're job coaching, you want actually the people there to be able to do as much of the training as possible, and then you are part of that process. So when the things that maybe they're not able to get from that manager or that coworker or that trainer on site is going to be where you're going to be filling in the gaps and providing that coaching. And so you'll be able to see some of the things that they're able to do and then break it down as needed. And then process, just some tips on process. Forward chaining basically forward chaining is where you go the first step. Then when they master the first step, you go to the second step, you go to the third step, and so on. So after they come up with task mastery on step by step, moving from the beginning of how something is done to the end, that would be forward chaining. Backward chaining is where you go to the very end. You do just the opposite. You take the last step. So for example, if you're job coaching somebody in, say, dishwashing, for example, and the last step is to put the dishes away, then that would be the first thing you would be training. They call that backward chaining. One of the things you might ask, well, why would you do that? Some people that you might be training don't always want to endure learning, and maybe they're not getting it from the very beginning. And so you might switch to backward training because then they can see success very quickly. So they're putting the dishes away. Oh, that's great. So that's a task that they're learning to do. And then they don't have to wait to go through the whole entire process. They'll work backwards. And then as they've mastered putting the dishes away, for example, where things go, orientation of where things are in that environment, then they might go to pulling the dishes out of the machine, for example, or unstacking them. And then again, working your way back to where they've mastered everything from the beginning. And you can always switch up if they're able to do that and then they want to begin, and you can always switch up to your forward chaining at that point as well. On your feedback, the way that you communicate your instruction, verbal, gestural, sometimes, verbal is too much. People just don't want to hear it. Too much verbiage just really becomes background noise for some people. And so sometimes you just may need to point, or you may even just need to look at something that needs to be done. And that's as much as you have to do. Some people would require a physical assist to where you may have to you may have to do hand over hand. We really don't see a whole lot of that done, because that's more when you see in school when they're doing ABA type of task analysis. But sometimes physical assist is you may need that hierarchy of assistance. So you always want to begin with the lowest possible, and that could be gestural or verbal, depending on how the person is better responds. And so that's also, again, something that you can learn when you're looking into somebody's ISP, or if you're looking maybe at some notes from something, maybe if they've done some type of assessment. But again, knowing that person is really important to when you're putting together your task analysis. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, please. By the way, if you have any questions on all these things, you can put them in the chat box and we'll take a look at them, or you can raise your hand as well, either way, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay, things to consider as you develop, as you structure your development. There's a typo in there. Develop your task analysis. So what objects are used to perform the task? So if a person, if we go back to the dishwashing thing, so something they might be using as a scraper to scrape the things off. You want to keep in mind all the things that they might use as a tool to perform the task. Environmental demands. And so if it's too hot, you want to look at, are there ways that they can cool off, or what are some things that they can do to cool off? Are there safety things that you want to look at? So you want to consider all of these things in your task analysis. Any social demands, if there are things that they need to be doing to where there's some social interactions, you want to kind of think about that as you're building your task analysis. Really important, sequencing and the timing of the task. So knowing that, let's say, for example, and I just use dishwashing because that's a very sequential one. The dirty dishes come in, they get cleaned, they get sorted, they get sprayed, they go through. So when you think about the sequence of things, let's say you're training dishwashing, and the dishes are coming in and they're building up, but the person is still just learning the back end. Let's say you're doing backward chaining on one. So you may have to switch off so that they can see that there's a sense of urgency at certain times. And so you have to kind of balance that in, like the urgency versus their where they are with their training, and then try to include them in as much of that as you can. Actions required to complete the task. So just all of the things that they might need to do to be able to complete the task, and the actions that they're going to be required. all of those are things that you want to consider as you're structuring your task analysis. Okay, next slide, please. Basic characteristics of a good task analysis. And so use clear, specific language. We try to avoid any jargon that we may have, because these are going to be things and use as little of it as possible. You always want to make sure that you're starting your task analysis with a verb like start machine or whatever the action statement is. You want to start off with a verb when you're doing your task analysis, because you're trying to get a task done, and it's going to take some type of a actionable statement to be able to get that task done. Avoid building in artificial cues and materials. So things that are not going to be there when you leave, try to avoid building them in as you're starting, because when you leave there, they're going to be leaving with you, and then it could leave the person gaps with the person's learning. Sequencing the steps in the order which they're performed. So when you're doing your task analysis, you'll start off with the very beginning of what's going to happen, and you're going to end up on what the end of the day looks like. And you want to state all of your steps positively, so that, as you're communicating these steps to the person, or you're using verbal prompts, you always want to keep everything positive as you're doing your tasks. And write steps so each one can be used as a verbal prompt, which I'd already covered that. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so typically what I would do is I would have everybody do some task analysis, and we are obviously not going to be able to do that today. So we will go on to the next task. But if we were, these would be some of the things that I would ask you to do, just to do a simple task analysis. But let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so job training techniques, prompting and cueing. So the prompting, when do you prompt and when do you cue, and what's the difference between the two? So prompting would be to your response to be a verbal prompt or a gestural prompt, and you would want to use the hierarchy of that so that you're not doing too much. Because remember, anything that you're doing as a job coach, the more you put into it, the more you're going to be taking out of it. So you want to try to use the least amount as possible. So if the prompting, and you want to give the person a chance to be able to also to be able to do the task. And so if they're not moving at a speed that's going to be acceptable, then you'll consider doing prompts, either gestural or verbal. And then cueing is basically the difference between prompting and cueing. Is cueing really is you're giving the person what should you do? Like, what's next? That can be a prompt and a cue, but it also has them thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to do next based off of where we are in this sequence of getting the job done. So you would give them the cue, or or give them the clue, and you're allowing them to be able to understand what it is they're to be able to do next. So prompting and cueing. Task training, we talked already about forward and backward training. Partial participation. So a lot of times when you're job coaching, you may be doing partial participation just to be able to keep the job moving. Again, partial participation, you got to really be careful that your partial participation doesn't turn into you being the one who does the job, and the person understands that this is their job, but you're going to be fading out of that as the learning occurs. Parallel pacing is a job training technique that you could use to show especially if there's a sense of urgency that's needed. And again, I'll just go back to dishwashing. As the dishes are piling up and the person's pace is not increasing, you might say to the person, okay, we need to pick up the pace, and then they see you picking up the pace, and hopefully they will try to model the pace and get the sense of urgency that's needed to increase their pace to get the job done in a timely manner. So parallel pacing it's kind of like it's not like you're in a race, but it is you using a modeling technique so they can understand, and you can use verbal along with that as well, so that they can see how fast you need to be moving and what pace they need to be at to get the job done. Match to sample. Again, just going back to dishwashing as our set task. Match to sample would be, let's say somebody is cleaning, they're spraying off dishes and they're just not getting things done enough that the machine's not going to get done. So you might show them, here's what a clean dish looks like, and here is the dish that they've done. So this is what it needs. You're matching to the sample of here's what the outcome needs to look like. And you can use that in all types of different tasks, match to sample. Job-related tasks are things that have to do with, just things that the person needs to do on the job, like if they're going to be taking a break, if there's things that they may have to do, like clocking in. Those are all job-related tasks. And so how you train them should also be on your task analysis. And then training unwritten rules. So things like unwritten rules might be that if the boss is coming around and you might be socializing with somebody, that might be a good time to get back to work. These are things that are just unwritten rules that occur, and the nuances along with them sometimes do not, they don't always get all of the subtle nuances that are on the unwritten rules. It might also be that if people are bringing in donuts or something like that, there may be times when you might do that, or the person you're working with, that might be their turn to do that. So those types of things that are not necessarily in the job description, or that are not part of getting the job done, but are still kind of going on in the area that they're working in, would be something that you would want to kind of go over with them. And sometimes you'll learn about those things as you're training, and you have to, again, get creative. And this is where the creativity with job coaches comes into play. Get creative in how you can get the person to be included in some of these things, like little get-togethers. It could be just break time, things that happen at break time, starting conversations, all of those types of things. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, please. Job coach tools of the trade. So field notes. What I want to say about field notes is that, as we take our notes, if we have our notes with us out, generally, if you can leave them back at the office, that's best. You always want to really be careful, and you want to observe confidentiality if you're doing your notes, and you don't want to be setting them out or leaving them out. So be very careful with your field notes. If you need to leave them in your car, that could be best. And if you need to do some proximal fading and go to your car and maybe make some notes, or if you happen to have like maybe a very small notebook that you can write some notes in, again, use that. And you don't want to be standing around writing notes about people. You want to make sure that you kind of go somewhere where you're able to do that, and not standing out so much and looking like you're doing some type of a clinical study. That's one of the things with job coaching. You just have to remember, people are watching you, and they're not really sure what a job coach necessarily does, but what you do then defines what they see as a job coach. So you want to keep that positive, and keep the kind of make sure you're observing that confidentiality. A cell phone is always something that I would advise a job coach to have, and these are just part and parcel. These are pretty no-brainers. Emergency contact information, business cards in the event that they need to get in touch with you. There's a way to do that, and so making sure that they can get in touch with you and have your phone number and your contact information. If there's any company literature, if it's asked for, if the manager would like to have some of that, having that available if you happen to have that in your car. And then, of course, some basic first aid kit, and you want to make sure that you have gloves. And so those are just some of the basics that job coaches, some of the tools of the trade. We'll go on to the next slide. Natural supports. So natural supports is anything that's ready available within the environment of the employee. So it can be the person, it could be their coworker, it could be their boss, it could be really anything that's just there to help the person, that is not the job coach or is not somebody who's paid to be in there. So natural supports are anything that's ready available to the person. Natural supports, you want to, during your job analysis, you want to notice any tasks that promote interaction between the coworkers. So anything that might be, for example, again, back to the dishwashing example, let's say that the person is taking dishes to a certain part of the kitchen, and they may be able to, you might want to encourage interactions to where they're saying, here, here's the dishes, where would you like me to put them? Or, just things that they might be able to have interactions with, say, the people working in the kitchen, or it could be work with the servers. So think about tasks that can promote interactions between the coworkers, because that's really where you're going to be able to develop your basis for these natural supports, is having that person be able to initiate these conversations or just brief interactions that they might have on the job. Informal occasions for interaction, such as checking the mailbox if people have mailboxes, or if they're walking to the store to purchase lunch, or at the water cooler. All of these areas, or the break room, these are all informal occasions where you can help promote some interactions with the people who are there on the job site. And then, of course, formal occasions for interaction, such as staff meetings or holiday parties or consistent break times. So these are always great opportunities that you can promote natural supports and have them be enmeshed kind of into the fabric of the organization. Next slide, please. Job training etiquette. These are just some basic, these are things, no-brainer things, but I think that they bear worth talking about a little bit. Use people first language. So when you're talking, about persons with disabilities, you want to present yourself and the employee in a positive manner and dress accordingly. So, this is just an obvious thing. You wouldn't want to go in with t-shirts and holy jeans. Obviously, some type of appropriate dress would be. And then again, you also don't want to go in with a shirt and tie, especially if you're job training, say in a dishwashing setting or in a factory setting. Do not discuss the person's disability, confidentiality. I know that sounds really crazy, that you would think, well, why would I do that? But you have no idea. People will actually, and I've had this happen many times, people will come up and say, what is their disability? What's kind of going on there? And you really just have to get creative in ways to move that conversation away from that. And you want to make sure that you're respecting that person's confidentiality. No cell phone chatting on your phones. I have actually been in places where I have seen job coaches working. I knew that they were job coaching. I could tell what they were actually talking on their cell phones, or they're using laptops. I've seen all of these happen, or having people come in and visit them on the job site. Those are just basic no-goes. So if you have to talk on your phone, try to go somewhere where you're not going to be visible when they're not going to be seeing you. People would include the customers, and that would also include obviously the coworkers and supervisors. Try to, if it happens, try to make it happen in as least amount as possible. As far as the cell phones or being on your cell phone, just be professional and keep personal stuff personal. So, remember you're there, you're representing your organization, you're representing, most importantly, that person. So you don't want to talk about a lot of personal things going on with some people there. So just be very professional. And then the last thing I put on there is don't air dirty laundry. I've seen this happen before, where job coaches may not be happy, and they may be staff who are maybe ready to leave the organization, and they decide they're gonna talk not great about the organization they're working for. Do not do that. Do not air dirty laundry. That does not help anybody, and it only hurts the person that you're working with there, because it really does just paint a negative, just kind of a negative picture of the person's situation there. So no airing of dirty laundry. These are all just basic things that are common sense. So, but they still bear worth talking about. Okay, next slide, please. To fade or not to fade. So here are some basics on fading. And knowing when to do that is critical. And going back to task analysis, having your task analysis really can be your GPS or your guide for when you're to fade and when not. And so if a person is, when you're doing your task analysis and they've mastered most everything in the morning, but they're still working on things in the afternoon, you want to make sure that you're able to do a fade plan for, what that's going to look like for when you're fading. Proximal fading. Proximal fading is when you're not having direct contact with the person. You don't have eye contact. You don't have, you may not be able, they may not be able to hear you. So proximal fading might be, let's say, again, back to the example for the dishwashing position. If a person's working in the dish room, you may be fading out to somewhere else, like in the break room, or you may be fading wherever you find that sweet spot to where you're still gonna have access, but you're not right there with the person. Offsite fading might be, for example, the person, again, has mastered the first part of the shift, and you've worked with the employer. They understand that you're not going to be there in the first part of it, so you're offsite, and then you'll come on if they say they start at 9 o'clock, and then you may come in at 10 o'clock. So you faded the first part, offsite faded the first part, or that could be at the end of the schedule as well, depending on where they are with their learning of the job. And then a fade schedule. I think that most of the people that we're working with, OOD, DD, are going to look for a fade schedule. They're going to want to know at what point you're going to be reducing the amount of interventions that you're going to be providing. So be prepared to put together a fade schedule. Probably, it really just depends on the person, but you want to be thinking about a fade schedule from day one, what that's going to look like. You're not going to know that on day one, but you want to just keep that on your radar to be thinking about, well, at what point are we going to be talking about me not being here, me as a job coach not being here? Do's and don'ts on fading. I'm just going to really put one out there, and this is a don't. And this happened back in the years ago, where we used to call it camping. And so people would never, some of the job coaches would just stay there way, way, way too long, and they would not fade. And then you get into that situation where then the expectations are the employer expects you to be there. And unfortunately, the person expects you to be there. So you want to make sure that the don't on that fading is that don't hang out there more than you need to. So that really does really show the importance of needing that fade schedule. So do a fade schedule and don't camp if you don't need to be there. Make sure that you're not just hanging out there. So those are a couple of the do's and don'ts. We'll go to the next slide, please. Data collection. You want to write objectively, so you don't say, I think he liked the job. So you want to make sure your statements are just objectives. John stated he enjoyed his job, so that would be that would be an objective statement. You want to state the facts, not your opinions. You want to be specific about your observations. Be careful to observe confidentiality guidelines. So again, not leaving your notes around or leaving somebody's paperwork sitting around. You don't want to wait to record your data too long. You want to keep it fresh. So make sure that, if it's going back to your office or going back to wherever it is, your hub that you're working from, you don't want to put that off, because things really, after time, you're working with a person day in and day out. To wait too long to do your data, it really it makes it more difficult for you to be able to be give good specific objective writings or notes about how the person is doing. Be concise with your documentation, so make sure that what you're putting is just very accurate and it's packaged well, especially when you're doing your OOD notes, or if you're doing your any notes for waiver services under individual employment supports. So just be very concise with your documentation. Again, I keep saying this, keep your field notes secure and protected. And then follow up if you have documented issues. Make sure that you do follow up on those. So if a person, maybe one day there was things that happened that day and you wrote a note about it, that you need to maybe check that out, how it's going with this particular task or with this particular interaction. Make sure that you follow up on any of your documented issues. So those are some basic data collection tips. Next slide, please. Some questions to consider when you're doing your data. Is the training making progress? Again, task analysis is going to help you to make that decision or to show evidence that the person is making progress or not. And if it's not, what's causing the problem? So this is where job coaches really have to be able to solve some of the problems and have to really be able to delve in and use some of their talents of problem solving to figure out what's causing the problems. Is the trainee ready to learn more and move on to the next step? Again, I keep going back to task analysis. Task analysis is going to tell you they've mastered this, and this. And are they ready to go on to the next? You have good data, good evidence to show that yes, they can, or no, maybe they need to work on this or that. Does the training strategy need to be revised? It's okay to change things if they need to, if things are not working. If you've just been using verbal prompts the whole time and really that you've seen that might be irritating maybe for the person, you really just need to think about your training strategy. Maybe consider using more gestural prompts or modeling, whatever that might be. So you can definitely change that up. Does it need to be revised? Is the training meeting the employer's work performance expectations? Two things about that. You definitely want to check in with the employer. So how are things going? But you don't want to overcheck either. And so what I want to say about that is, so sometimes we want to go up. You don't need to go up every day or every, a couple times a day. How are they doing? How are they doing? What happens, or what I've seen happen over the years, is that the more you do that, then the more the person, or the supervisor, or the coworker feels compelled to, well, let me see. Well, there was that one thing. They feel like they need to give you something. And so sometimes you're borrowing trouble by asking way too much as far as how they're doing. So gauge that, use your gut feelings on how that's going. Don't let it go too long, but don't over ask or don't over probe, how they're going when you're talking with the employer. Is the trainee ready for increased independence? Is the data tracking consuming more time? So if you're spending more time tracking data, you need to really think about, well, how can I be more efficient with my notes? Next slide, please. Assistive technology, some of the things, think about using timers, smartphones, watches, low-tech solutions, iPads for maybe some video learning, and think about possibly remote coaching. Those are some of the things to think about for assistive technology. Next one, we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to get through these. Oh, we got through it. Okay, so we are right on time. I did want to, Patty, can we go back to assistive technology? I blew through that one pretty quick. I did just want to give a shout out to some low tech things. We're always thinking about, some of the technology things and some of the great things we have as far as high tech things, using smartphones and watches, and those are some great things. But there are also just some very good low tech solutions. I know that I worked with a guy at Kroger's, and his job was it was a customized employment thing where he actually would just use trying to think of what it was called now, a knitting hoop that was connected to this popcorn machine, and he used the funnel. He had the use of one hand, and so he was able to put the popcorn bag in around the knitting hoop, and then put a funnel on top of that, and then scoop out with one hand. So long story short, that was about as low tech as you can get, but it worked for him. And so sometimes we overthink and we try to get too techie with what we're doing, but sometimes just thinking about very simple low tech options for people can get the job done. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Smartphones, using iPads, those types of things, timers, those are all good things. Sometimes just having something about what's next. You may have just a small Post-it note that says what's next, so that the person is thinking, okay, I'm not just going to stand here. I need to move on to the next task. And sometimes it can be just as simple as a small little note that's not so obvious. It doesn't point the person out so much, but just says what's next. So be thinking about low tech. Give low tech a try as well as some of the high tech things. We are at 11 o'clock. I'm just going to see, is there any questions, anything that people may have? I don't see anything in the chat. All right. I want to thank everybody for listening in. This will be available, and we are recording this, so this will be available on the live binders. And so, Christine, if anybody needs that, you can maybe forward them the link for that, or you can. My email address is down there. You can email me as well, and I can make sure that you get a copy of this training. So, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out, and have a great day.
Thank you, Mark. This was great.
Thank you.
Loved it.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care, guys.
Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.